September 29th dawned blood-red, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. The Ottoman War Council had decided, today, Eger would fall. Ahmed Pasha ordered 15,000 troops to attack simultaneously from all sides. No more probes, no more tests, no more patience. This was the killing blow that would end Hungarian resistance forever. The assault began at first light with a bombardment that dwarfed all previous efforts. Every Ottoman cannon fired continuously, the sound merging into one continuous roar of destruction. The eastern wall, already weakened by weeks of pounding, began to crumble. By noon, a breach had opened 15 feet wide, rubble-strewn but passable, the nightmare scenario every defender had feared. "The wall is down!" the cry echoed through the castle like a death sentence. Defenders rushed to the breach, knowing this was where they would live or die. Dobo positioned his best troops at the gap, but there weren't enough professional soldiers. That's when Eva Sisi led her women's battalion forward, carrying their cauldrons of boiling oil mixed with sulfur. Their faces showed no fear, only grim determination. The first Ottoman wave hit the breach like a steel tide. Janissaries, the elite of the elite, surged forward, expecting to face demoralized, broken soldiers. Instead, they met housewives who poured liquid fire from above without hesitation. The oil clung to armor and skin alike, burning with unholy intensity. Men who'd never screamed in battle screamed now, their voices joining a chorus of agony. Behind the women, children worked with desperate efficiency that would break your heart. 8-year-olds carried stones larger than their heads. 10-year-olds ran ammunition through kill zones, while Ottoman arrows fell like deadly rain. A boy named Peter, just 12 years old, would later be remembered for maintaining arrow supply to 3 different wall positions, while Ottoman fire fell around him. He never stopped running, never stopped delivering, even as friends fell beside him. But then came Bornemissa's moment, the culmination of weeks of obsessive preparation. He designed his defense specifically for this scenario, the breach packed with enemy troops. As Janissaries flooded into the gap, shoulder to shoulder in their eagerness to break through, he gave the signal. His assistants lit fuses on his newest creation, wooden wheels packed with gunpowder, metal fragments, and burning pitch. They rolled these infernal devices down wooden ramps directly into the breach. The first wheel exploded among packed Ottoman troops with devastating effect. The second followed, then a third, then more. The wheels' random bouncing paths made them impossible to avoid or predict. Flames spread through tightly packed ranks. The breach, meant to be the Ottomans' highway to victory, became a death trap where their own numbers worked against them. Bodies piled so high they formed a new barrier. Defenders used enemy corpses as shields, but the Ottomans were professionals, the finest siege troops in the world. They pulled back, regrouped, attacked again and again with mechanical precision. Below ground, a parallel battle raged in darkness. Ottoman miners had finally broken through into the castle's lower chambers. Hungarian counterminers met them in absolute blackness. The underground war became a nightmare of close-quarters combat where men fought with knives, picks, bare hands. The tunnels were too narrow for swords, too dark for aim to matter. Only savage determination decided who lived. Bornemissa had prepared for this too, placing explosive charges at key points throughout the tunnel system, ready to collapse entire sections if needed. When Ottoman troops began pouring through one breach underground, he made the hardest decision of his life. He gave the order. The explosion shook the entire castle to its foundations. The tunnel collapsed instantly, trapping dozens on both sides, enemy and friend alike, buried together in darkness. War made no distinctions between heroes and victims. October arrived with no respite, no mercy. The Ottomans committed their reserves fresh Janissary units, men who'd conquered Belgrade, who'd taken Rhodes, who'd never known defeat. They climbed the walls with professional efficiency. Hand-to-hand combat raged along the battlements. Defenders pushed ladders away only to see 2 more take their place. A Janissary commander named Mustafa led a group that actually gained the wall, fighting their way to the top against desperate resistance. For 10 minutes, Ottoman banners flew above Eger. Victory seemed certain. Then came one of the battle's strangest and most inspiring moments. The women of Eger, having exhausted their oil supplies, attacked with farm implements, transformed into weapons of war. scythes meant for grain-harvested soldiers instead. Pitchforks found gaps in armor with terrible efficiency. Eva Sisi herself, burns covering her arms from oil splashes, led the charge that retook the wall. In his command tent, Ali Pasha watched through his telescope with growing disbelief and rage. His elite troops, men who'd never failed in decades of warfare, were being pushed back by civilians. Worse, he could see doubts spreading through his ranks like plague. Soldiers who should have pressed forward hesitated, looking over their shoulders. The impossible was happening before his eyes. October 5th brought the ammunition crisis that nearly ended everything. The Ottomans, despite their massive supply train, were running low on cannonballs after weeks of bombardment. Inside Eger, the situation was catastrophic. Gunpowder supplies were nearly exhausted. Arrows were being pulled from corpses to fire again, washed of blood and used until they broke. Defenders improvised desperately, throwing anything they could lift. When gunpowder ran out, they threw stones. When stones ran low, they threw furniture, cooking pots, even their shoes. One defender later wrote, "We threw our possessions at them, then threw parts of the castle itself." But then came the reversal that seemed like divine intervention. Bornemissa, searching the castle's deepest cellars for anything useful, discovered a hidden cache barrels of gunpowder forgotten from decades past, left over from some earlier conflict. Not much, barely enough for one day of normal use, but enough for one more surprise, one final gamble. October 13th would be the final test, the day that would decide everything. Ahmed Pasha, furious at delays and embarrassment, ordered an all-out assault. 25,000 men would attack. No reserves, no rotation, no fallback plans. Everyone forward until the castle fell or the army broke. The assault began before dawn with a roar that shook the earth. Wave after wave struck the walls like ocean breakers. Ladders rose like forests of doom. The breach, filled with attackers surging forward. Every single defender was on the walls. Soldiers, civilians, women, children. A 14-year-old girl named Zizofia would later be remembered for maintaining her position with a crossbow after watching both her parents fall beside her. She never stopped firing, tears streaming down her face. The Ottomans gained the breach. They gained sections of wall. Victory seemed moments away, close enough to taste. Then Bornemissa unveiled his final creation using the last gunpowder, fire wheels larger than before, designed not just to explode, but to spray burning pitch in all directions. The first fire wheel rolled into the Ottoman ranks at the breach, then another and another, 5 in total. The packed troops had nowhere to flee. Fire spread through their ranks like judgment itself. At that crucial moment, Dobo led one final charge. Wounded, exhausted, armor dented and bloodied, he raised his sword and shouted words that would echo through Hungarian history. "For your children! For Hungary! Forward!" Every defender followed without hesitation. Soldiers, civilians, women, children all surged forward in one desperate, unified push. The Ottomans at the breach, already shaken by the fire wheels and weeks of impossible resistance, broke. The panic spread like wildfire. Elite janissaries, men who'd never retreated in their entire careers, ran. From the Ottoman command post, Ali Pasha watched his army dissolve before his eyes. Units that should have pressed forward pulled back. Officers couldn't restore order, their voices lost in the chaos. The impossible had happened. 40,000 had been stopped by 2,000. As the sun set on October 13th, something that shouldn't have been possible became undeniable reality. In the Ottoman command tent that night, the atmosphere was poisonous with recrimination. Ahmed Pasha and Ali Pasha faced each other across the map table, their bitter rivalry exploding into open hatred. The casualty report lay between them like an accusation. 10,000 Ottoman dead, a quarter of their force gone, including many elite troops who couldn't be replaced. Disease had begun spreading through the camps with terrifying speed. Dysentery from autumn rains, infected wounds festering in crowded conditions, the miasma of death itself. But the psychological damage was worse than any plague. Word spread through the camps that Eger was cursed, that the defenders weren't human but demons, who threw fire and fought after death. Janissaries who'd never known fear whispered about burning wheels that chased men uphill, about women who fought harder than warriors, about children who laughed while killing. That night, Ottoman scouts reported something else. Hungarian relief forces were finally approaching. Not many, perhaps 3,000 men, but fresh troops against an exhausted, demoralized army that had lost its will. At 2 in the morning on October 18th, the order went out: pack the camps. They would withdraw. In Eger Castle, exhausted defenders noticed the cannon fire had stopped. Dawn brought an impossible sight. The Ottoman camps were emptying, tents coming down, wagons loading. The great army that had seemed invincible was preparing to leave. Is it a trick? Defenders asked, unable to believe. Dobo sent scouts. They returned with incredible news. The Ottomans were truly retreating. David had not just faced Goliath. David had won. The victory speech Dobo gave was short because he could barely stand, his wounds seeping through bandages. "We held," he said simply. Hungary holds. But counting the cost sobered any celebration. Of 2,000 defenders, 700 were dead. Barely a family had escaped loss. The civilian casualties were horrific farmers, who'd become soldiers, mothers who'd become warriors, children who'd become heroes, all paid in blood. The wounded overwhelmed what medical knowledge existed. Eger's aftermath reshaped more than Hungary. News spread like wildfire across Europe. A minor castle had stopped the Ottoman tide, not with professional armies or foreign allies, but with ordinary people fighting for their homes. In Vienna, church bells rang for 3 days. In Rome, the Pope declared a day of celebration. The Holy Roman Emperor sent a letter preserved in Hungarian archives. All Christendom owes a debt to Eger's defenders. They have shown that faith and courage weigh more than numbers. From the Ottoman side, the defeat sparked soul-searching. One Janissary officer wrote, "We were not defeated by soldiers, but by a nation. Every person in that castle fought like their soul depended on it, because it did." The siege of Eger sent shockwaves across Europe that reshaped military thinking for generations. The Ottoman Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, had been halted by farmers and housewives. Strategically, Eger bought Hungary precious time. The Ottoman expansion westward stalled, giving the Habsburg Empire years to strengthen defenses. Vienna, which might have fallen in 1553, instead stood firm when Ottomans finally arrived in 1683. Those extra decades made all the difference between survival and conquest. But Eger's greatest impact was proving that ordinary people could alter history's course. The idea that civilians could be effective defenders revolutionized fortress design across Europe. The role of women at Eger shattered conventions. Eva Sisi and her battalion proved that warfare wasn't an exclusively male domain. For Hungary, Eger became a national touchstone. In centuries of foreign domination, Ottoman, then Austrian, then Soviet, the siege reminded Hungarians what they could accomplish united. The castle became a pilgrimage site, its broken walls more powerful than any intact fortress. Modern military theorists studying asymmetric warfare often cite Eger. When conventional force meets unconventional determination, all calculations change. Afghanistan, Vietnam. Countless conflicts show Eger's eternal truth. Motivated defenders fighting for home possess advantages that pure military power cannot overcome. Returning to our opening question, how did 2,000 ordinary Hungarians stop 40,000 elite Ottoman warriors? Now you understand. Not through superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but through something more fundamental. The Ottoman Empire assumed people would choose survival over freedom, that civilians would break under professional military pressure. They were wrong. At Eger, the defenders chose neither survival nor freedom alone. They chose each other. And in that choice, they found both victory and immortality. Empires rise and fall. Castles crumble to dust. But the lesson of Eger endures across centuries. When ordinary people stand together for what they love, they become extraordinary. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the world. If you want to explore more moments where ordinary people achieved the impossible, where desperate courage rewrote history's course, then subscribe to Flow of History. We bring you the battles, the betrayals, the blood-soaked turning points where everything changed in a single day. Hit that subscribe button now because the next story of impossible odds and world-changing triumph is coming soon. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.